Hello and welcome to our channel Uncorked. My name is Roland Zimmermann and I'm here to talk to you today about orange wine. What is it and how is it made? Where does it come from? And why you should try it the next time you're at a winery that actually has some. For those of you that are not familiar with how orange wine is made, I'll get into that in a little bit of detail right now. Orange wine, in a very simplistic explanation, is white grapes that are fermented like red grapes or macerated like red grapes. Now, for those of you that are not familiar with how red wines are made, that'll be explained in another video, but the short version is that it's skin contact in the young wine as it's fermenting. The same applies with orange wine. It basically means that the white grapes, once they've come in from the harvester or from the vineyard, immediately get crushed, destemmed, and put into a vat to ferment on the skin for an extended period of time. Each winery is a little bit different. In our facility here, what we do is about a 3 or 4 day maceration at a relatively low temperature. Now, why is that important, that contact? Well, again, in another video, we'll get into more detail as to how red wines are made, but what's important is that the maceration extracts color from the skin, because most of the skin of the grape actually holds all the color pigments of the particular grape. Now, this is true for whether it's white, red, purple, or a yellow grape variety. All grapes are like this. There are some exceptions where some grapes actually have the flesh colored on the inside, but those are newer varieties that have recently come out over the last 20 to 30 years in the industry. And that's a whole different video that we'll get into with our red wines. Getting back to the orange wine and how it's made. Once the winemaker has determined that the quality of the grapes is good enough to make an orange wine, aka skin ferment the wine for an extended period of time, he then has to very carefully monitor the fermentation, because too much time on the skin may make the wine very bitter, versus too little time may make the wine too light in color. So it's a more involved process of making a wine, even more so than a red versus a white, because usually reds, you throw them in the tank and you come and check on them in about 4 or 5 days. And it's pretty much the same for the whites. You throw them in the tank and you check on them maybe on a daily basis, just quickly to make sure the fermentation is progressing. But orange wines, as I mentioned, are far more involved in terms of the winemaker's time in a very, very busy harvest season. Obviously, once the winemaker has deemed that sufficient color and sufficient flavor, because that's the other thing that's extracted from the orange wines in the skin is more flavor, more depth of flavor, versus the whites, which are usually just pressed out, then it's time to actually get the wine onto the press. Now, this is trickier than most pressings because you have a liquid that is fermenting. It's basically gassing off as you're putting it into the press and pressing it out. So it's kind of a very, I don't want to say volatile, but it is quite a messy process most of the time, because there's lots of headaches with gas forming in the lines, and then basically pumps not being able to suck the liquid because it's sucking gas, and yada, 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 yada. If you're a winemaker, you completely understand where I'm coming from with this one. For those of you that you don't know, kind of think of it like you're trying to suck up a whole bunch of Coca-Cola through a straw. At some point, it's going to hit you in the head, and it's just not going to be a fun experience. And that really happens in the winery in the same way with pumps and with presses. They just don't really like fermenting liquids as part of their process. They prefer them to be a lot flatter. I have a special treat for you guys today. I wanted to show you what our orange wine looks like. So hopefully, if you'll bear with me a couple seconds here, this will work out quite well. This is our 2016 Pinot Grigio orange wine, and as you can kind of see through the bottle here, it kind of has a really dark color, but this should hopefully elaborate it a little bit more. And that dark color really only comes from direct skin contact, which is what I was explaining to you earlier. And that's what it also imparts, and I've kind of alluded to this a little bit earlier, is a lot more flavor. So this particular wine, in our case, in our winery, this particular wine has almost a feel like you're drinking a red wine versus a white wine. So it is fruity, but it also has a lot more mouthfeel. That's what they call when it's kind of really rolling around in your mouth and it keeps lingering, it keeps coming, and there's more flavor, just keeps evolving. And that's kind of what this new trend or this new style of wine is, called orange wine. Now, I say new style. I say new style for New World wineries. So anything in North America, this is a new style of wine. Originally, orange wine came from Europe, and not just anywhere in Europe, but Eastern Europe. And countries like the Ukraine or Georgia actually still, and have for centuries, produced orange wine. Only they didn't quite do it with modern techniques. They did something called amphimores, or basically very, very large clay jars that were buried in the ground to keep the temperature consistent. So what they literally did is they harvested the fresh grapes, crushed them, threw them in this huge, basically pit, is what it kind of looked like, or tank, underground, and fermented it until it was fully dry. Now, their style of orange wine is very different from the style that we make here at King's Court, as well as what a lot of wineries in North America are making. Because the North American palate isn't quite there yet in terms of the complexity of flavor and the intensity that can be made with an orange wine. But not to worry, I'm sure with a little bit of time and a lot more drinking, you'll all get there. Now, why should you care to try it? Well, this is the newest style of wine that is permitted under the VQA regulations. Again, for those of you that are not familiar, in Ontario, we have a regulatory or an appellation body which regulates certain terms in the industry, such as orange wine. This is why on the label of an orange wine, you can see in very clear white writing, skin fermented white. This is to ensure that the consumer completely understands what the process that was involved to make the wine. And again, if you haven't tried it yet, there's a number of wineries that are experimenting with this. We've been producing an orange wine now for about 5 or 6 years consistently, and we've been experimenting with this style of wine for about a decade prior to even having anything in bottle. And the reason why you won't find anything earlier than our 2016 is because, well, I'm sorry, we drank it all. It was that good. But in any case, we still have a supply of some of our original packaged vintage available for those of you that would really like to try it, and we look forward to welcoming you to our tasting room. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe below and give us some likes, as well as any feedback and comments you have. We look forward to answering your questions. Thank you very much. Again, see you next week.